Imagine a silence that has lasted for 3 billion years. A heavy, iron-cold stillness where the only movement is the shifting of red dust under a frozen violet sky. This is Mars, a world of ancient rust and sleeping stone. But deep in the shadows of the Valles Marineris, a new heartbeat has begun. It is not a heartbeat of flesh and blood, but of rhythmic hydraulics and solar-powered resolve. You are about to witness the greatest slow-motion miracle in the history of the stars. In this 2-hour journey, you will drift across a landscape in transition. You will hear the mechanical ASMR of the first rovers as they carefully deposit life into the dust. You will watch as the dry ice of the poles thaws into ghostly swirling mists, and the first splashes of gray-green lichen claim the crimson boulders. This is not a story of conquest, but of patience. It is the steady, rhythmic pulse of a planet waking up. A 1,000-year symphony of uncurling ferns, falling rain, and the slow, majestic swaying of the first true forests. Close your eyes, breathe with the machines, and watch the horizon turn from red to emerald. The terraforming has begun. Chapter 1. The First Spore. The silence of Mars is not an absence of sound, but a presence of weight. It is a heavy, ancient stillness that has rested upon the iron-rich dust for 3 billion years. Here, in the shadow of the Eos Chasma, the atmosphere is so thin that the stars do not twinkle, they stare, unblinking, cold, and eternal. Into this stillness comes a new sound. It is not the howl of a dust storm or the sharp crack of a thermal fracture. It is a rhythmic, metallic pulse. Click, whir, thrum. The rover, designated Aurelius IV, moves with a deliberate, agonizing slowness. Its 6 titanium wheels crush the fine basaltic sand, creating a sound like dry parchment being folded. To a human ear, this would be a lonely sound, but Aurelius is not lonely. It is programmed for the long game. It is the first gardener of a dead world, and it has all the time in the universe. The anatomy of the machine. Aurelius stops. The suspension settles with a soft hiss of pneumatic fluid. The machine is a study in functional elegance, a silver body coated in a fine layer of butterscotch-colored dust. Its long, articulated arm extends from its chassis with the grace of a crane's neck. There is no urgency in the movement. In the low gravity of Mars, every motion is fluid, almost underwater in its pacing. The sensors on the rover's head swivel. They are not looking for life, they are looking for the perfect cradle to create it. It scans a nearby outcropping of volcanic rock, a jagged, dark shelf that has remained unchanged since the planet's core went cold. The rover's internal processors hum, a low-frequency vibration that resonates through the frozen ground. It calculates the angle of the sun, the protection from the solar winds, and the mineral composition of the crevice. Target acquired. The preparation of the soil. The arm descends. At the end of the limb is a delicate, multi-fingered manipulator. It does not simply drop its cargo. First, it prepares the site. A small, high-pressure puff of recycled nitrogen clears the ancient dust from a tiny fold in the rock. The sound is a sharp psst, the first breath of a new atmosphere. Beneath the dust, the rock is dark and thirsty. From a pressurized canister within its core, the rover extracts a single microscopic capsule. Inside this shell is a marvel of bioengineering, a hardy synthetic lichen spore crossbred with the DNA of Earth's most resilient extremophiles and reinforced with silica-based shells to withstand the radiation of the Martian surface. It is a speck of potential, a tiny dormant spark of green in a world of red. The planting. The manipulator opens. With a precision measured in microns, the spore is placed into the shadows of the rock. The rover then releases a single drop of starter fluid, a viscous, nutrient-rich gel that acts as both an anchor and a life support system. The drop hits the rock with a soft, wet tink. For a moment, the gel shimmers under the weak light of the distant sun. It is a translucent pearl against the rust. The rover remains perfectly still, its camera zoomed in on the site, recording the placement for the archives back on the orbital station. It stays there for 10 minutes, then 20. It is monitoring the temperature, ensuring the gel doesn't flash freeze before it can bond with the stone. The silence returns, but it is different now. It is no longer the silence of a tomb. It is the silence of a nursery. The Watchman's Vigil. Aurelius IV begins its secondary task. It is not enough to plant, one must protect. The rover's secondary arm deploys a small translucent polymer shield over the crevice. This shield is designed to let in the specific wavelengths of light needed for photosynthesis while reflecting the lethal ultraviolet rays that bathe the planet. As the sun begins to dip toward the horizon, the shadows on Mars stretch into impossibly long, thin fingers. The temperature begins its rapid plunge toward -80 degrees Celsius. The rover's internal heaters click on with a faint, comforting metallic ping. It enters its sentinel state. Its solar panels fold inward, hugging its body to conserve heat. Its external lights dim to a soft, pulsing blue, a heartbeat in the dark. If you were standing there in the freezing dark, you would hear the faint, melodic singing of the wind through the rover's cooling fins. It sounds like a flute played at a great distance. The first stirring. Deep within the gel, the chemistry begins. The spore is not alive in the way we think of a frantic, scurrying animal. It is a slow chemical reaction. It senses the moisture. It feels the faint, filtered warmth of the sun. It begins to drink. The rover's sensors pick up the minute change in the chemical signature of the crevice, a tiny release of oxygen, a microscopic consumption of carbon dioxide. It is a transaction, the first trade between life and Mars. Aurelius records the data. Success. The rover does not feel joy, but its systems stabilize into a high-efficiency flow. It has completed its first task of the millennium. It waits for the twin moons, Phobos and Deimos, to track their jagged paths across the sky. The long night. The Martian night is vast. Above the rover, the Milky Way is a brilliant, unfiltered river of light. Without an atmosphere to scatter the stars, the universe feels intimate, pressing down on the silver machine and its tiny charge. Aurelius IV listens. Its sensitive microphones pick up the groans of the planet, the deep tectonic settling of the canyon walls. It picks up the distant, ghost-like whistle of a dust devil miles away on the plains of Chrysoplanitia.
But here, in the crevice, there is only the slow, silent expansion of the spore. It is knitting itself to the rock. It is sending out microscopic filaments, searching for the iron and magnesium locked within the basalt. It is turning the red planet into its own body. Dawn on the red ridge. When the sun finally breaks over the rim of the canyon, it catches the silver edges of the rover. The machine awakes. Its panels unfold with a series of soft, mechanical sighs, stretching like the wings of a giant insect. Aurelius performs a self-diagnostic. The power levels climb as the light hits the photovoltaic cells. It looks back down at the crevice. The spore is still there. It has survived its first night. The rover's wheels begin to turn. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It moves forward 100 meters to the north toward the next designated planting site. It leaves behind a small, shielded pocket of hope. Behind it, the tracks of its wheels look like a long, braided ribbon leading back toward the landing site. In 1,000 years, this spot will be the floor of a forest. The rock will be covered in deep, springy moss. The air will be thick enough to carry the scent of pine and damp earth. But for now, there is only the red dust, the silver machine, and the slow, rhythmic pulse of the terraformers. The infinite cycle. As Aurelius IV moves into the distance, its silhouette becoming a mere speck against the vastness of the chasma, the camera lingers on the first sight. The sun warms the polymer shield. Inside, a tiny, almost invisible patch of green begins to darken. It is a color that has never existed on this planet before. It is a defiant, beautiful green. The silence of Mars returns, but the weight is gone. The planet is no longer waiting to die. It is waiting to wake up. Click, whir, thrum. The journey has begun.
Chapter 2. The Rhythm of the Rovers. To understand the transformation of Mars, one must first understand the music of the machines. It is not the jarring, discordant noise of an industrial factory. It is a symphony of deliberate, repetitive precision, a mechanical heartbeat that has become the new pulse of the red planet. As the sun climbs higher over the jagged horizon of the Meridiani Planum, a fleet of specialized units, the segmented harvesters, begins its daily trek across the iron-rich flats. These are the workers of the deep crust, the heavy lifters that provide the mineral foundations for the greening to come. But they do not move with the haste of earthly construction. They move with a rhythmic, hypnotic grace that invites the mind to settle into a state of deep, mechanical calm. The Song of the 6 Wheels. Listen to the wheels. Each rover is equipped with 6 high-flexibility titanium mesh tires. They do not pop or hiss, they crunch. It is a textured, multi-layered sound, the scritch, scritch, scritch of fine basaltic sand being displaced, followed by the heavier, hollow clack as a tire rolls over a fragment of volcanic glass. The sound repeats with every rotation: crunch, pause, clack, roll. The cadence is steady, never varying by more than a fraction of a second. It is the sound of progress measured in centimeters. On Earth, we are used to the roar of internal combustion and the frantic whine of electric motors. Here, in the thin Martian air, sound travels differently.
It is dampened, stripped of its harsh edges, leaving only the bass notes of the metal meeting the stone. As a rover climbs a gentle incline, the motor in each wheel hub hums. It is a low-frequency vibration, a digital purr that resonates through the rover's chassis. It sounds like a hive of bees, muffled by a thick velvet curtain. It is a comforting sound, the sound of a system operating at peak efficiency, cool and composed in the face of the eternal dust. The hydraulic breath. When a rover reaches its designated coordinates, it stops. The cessation of movement is followed by a distinct pneumatic sigh. This is the sound of the suspension settling, the leveling of the chassis as the hydraulic fluid rebalances itself to compensate for the uneven terrain. It is the machine's version of a long, deep breath after a steady walk. Then comes the movement of the sampling arm. The arm is a marvel of fluid dynamics. As it telescopes outward, you hear the soft, oily slide of metal on metal, a sound so smooth it feels almost cool to the touch. It is followed by the sharp, rhythmic click-whir-click of the micro-actuators in the wrist of the arm. These are tiny, precise adjustments, moving the sensors into position with the delicacy of a jeweler. The sound of the drill is the most meditative of all. It is not a jackhammer, it is a sonic corer. It vibrates at a frequency that turns the hard Martian crust into a fine, flowing powder. The sound is a steady, resonant drone, a deep B-flat that vibrates in the chest. Around the drill bit, the dust begins to dance, leaping in the low gravity, creating a soft, whispering sound as it settles back onto the rover's deck. Shh. It is the sound of a world being gently dismantled so that it may be rebuilt. The chorus of the fleet. In the distance, other rovers are working. Because the atmosphere is thin, sound does not carry far, but the vibrations travel through the bedrock. If you were to lay your head against a cool red stone, you would feel the distant rhythm of the fleet. It is a polyrhythmic tapestry. To the east, the mist makers are venting pressurized water vapor into the shadows of a crater. Puff, puff, puff. To the west, the levelers are clearing a path for the first irrigation lines, their blades scraping the surface with a long, drawn-out shrood.
Together, these sounds form the rhythm of the rovers. It is a loop of productivity that never ends. There is no shouting here, no sirens, no alarms, only the steady mechanical dedication of machines that do not know how to be tired. They are the monks of the Red Desert, performing their daily rituals with infinite patience. The cooling cycle. As the midday sun reaches its peak, the rovers pause for their thermal regulation cycle. This is a moment of near total stillness, punctuated only by the internal sounds of the machine's cooling systems. Deep within the rover's brain compartment, fans spin at high speeds to dissipate the heat generated by the complex terraforming calculations. The sound is a high-pitched, ethereal whistle, like a distant wind through a mountain pass. It is joined by the intermittent tink, tink, tink of the rover's outer shell expanding and contracting under the heat of the sun. These sounds are the small talk of the machines. They are the evidence of life,
not biological life, but a functional, purposeful existence. The rovers are communicating with their environment, adjusting their internal temperatures, recalibrating their sensors, and preparing for the next shift of the 1,000-year plan. The dust whispering. Sometimes a light breeze picks up across the plains. It is not enough to move a rock, but it is enough to lift the finest grains of hematite. The dust brushes against the rover's solar panels like silk rubbing against silk. The rovers have automated brushes to clear this dust. You can hear the rhythmic sweep, sweep, sweep of the carbon fiber bristles as they pass over the glass. It is a domestic sound, a cleaning ritual that keeps the power flowing. It reminds us that even in the vastness of space, the most important work is often the smallest, the keeping of the light, the clearing of the path. The evening descent. As the shadows begin to stretch once more, the rovers prepare to transition to their nighttime positions. The music shifts into a lower key. The movements become even slower to conserve the battery power stored during the day. The wheels find their final resting places for the night. Crunch, crunch, stop. The arms fold back into their housings with a series of final, satisfying clicks. The external sensors retract behind protective shutters. Zip, snap. The fleet becomes a series of silent, silver statues under the stars. But even in the sleep of the machines, there is a rhythm. The internal clocks continue to tick. The data continues to upload to the satellites overhead in a silent, invisible stream of light. The peace of the pattern. For the listener, the rhythm of the rovers is a reminder of the power of consistency. One spore, one rock, one wheel turn at a time. The red planet is being changed not by a violent explosion, but by the steady application of mechanical will. As you listen to the phantom sounds of the Martian garden, the whirring, the clicking, the soft sighs of the hydraulics, you feel the heavy weight of your own day begin to lift. Your breathing begins to sync with the slow pulse of the sensors. Your thoughts become as steady and calm as the rover's path. The machines are awake, so you don't have to be. They are watching the red horizon. They are counting the grains of sand. They are maintaining the rhythm so that the green can grow. The silence of Mars is no longer empty. It is filled with the promise of the machines. It is filled with the steady, soothing heartbeat of a world being born. Click, whir, thrum. Everything is in its place. The pattern is holding. The rhythm continues.
Chapter 3. The Thaw of the Poles. The great transformation of Mars does not begin at its equator, under the direct heat of the sun, but at its frozen extremities. The Martian poles, vast, swirling caps of carbon dioxide ice and ancient water, are the reservoirs of the planet's future. For eons, this frozen breath of the world has remained locked in a jagged white silence. But now, under the focused gaze of the orbital mirrors and the heat-generating pulses of the terraforming units, the silence is beginning to break. This is the season of the Great Thaw. It is a transition of light, shadow, and the ethereal sound of solid gas returning to the sky. The Sublimation Symphony. On the South Pole, at the edge of the Planum Australe, the temperature is rising. It is not a sudden heat, but a slow, persistent warming that coaxes the dry ice from its slumber. On Mars, ice does not often melt into liquid. It sublimates. It turns directly from a solid into a gas, a process that creates a landscape of ghosts. Listen to the sound of the ice as it wakes. It is not the splashing of an earthly spring. Instead, it is a high-pitched crystalline tinkling. As the layers of frozen carbon dioxide begin to destabilize, the pressure from gas trapped beneath the surface creates microscopic fractures. Crackle, ping, snap. It sounds like the finest chandelier glass shattering in slow motion. Then comes the hiss. As the gas escapes through these tiny vents, it creates a soft, continuous shh. It is the sound of the planet finally exhaling. It is a white noise so pure and consistent that it blankets the entire polar region, a soothing static that vibrates through the frozen ground. The dance of the dry ice mists. As the sun, a pale, brilliant diamond, hangs low over the ice cliffs, the mists begin to rise. They do not rise like heavy earthly fog. In the low Martian gravity, the vapor moves with a dreamlike fluidity. The mists are thin, translucent veils of white and pale blue. They swirl around the bases of the terraforming towers, curling like smoke in a room with no wind. You can watch a single ribbon of vapor as it uncoils from a dark pit, rising in a slow, hypnotic spiral toward the violet sky. It moves with a weightlessness that defies the eye, expanding and thinning until it vanishes into the atmosphere. The towers, tall and skeletal, emit a low, deep hum. They are the conductors of this symphony, directing microwave beams into the ice to accelerate the release of the gas. The sound of the beams is a rhythmic, oscillating drone, a whum, 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 that feels like a heartbeat felt rather than heard. Against this deep bass, the light, airy hissing of the escaping gas creates a perfect balance. The geysers of the South. In certain regions, the thaw is more dramatic. Beneath the translucent sheets of spider ice, sunlight warms the dark dust below. The heat builds up, trapped by the ice above, until the pressure becomes too much. Suddenly, a plume of gas and dark dust erupts through the surface. It is a cold geyser. There is no explosion, no violent roar. Instead, there is a soft, muffled thump, followed by the sound of 1,000 tiny grains of sand raining back down onto the ice. Patter, patter, patter. It is a rhythmic occurrence. You can stand, in your mind, on the edge of a frozen ridge and watch these dark plumes rise into the air like ink in water. They drift slowly on the thickening breeze, spreading out into long feathered streaks. Each geyser is a contribution to the thickening air, a dark brushstroke on a white canvas. The shifting blue shadows. The colors of the poles are changing. What was once a blinding, uniform white is now a tapestry of blues, grays, and deep indigos. As the ice thins, the shadows in the crevasses become more deep, more saturated. The light at the poles is horizontal, casting shadows that are miles long. These shadows move across the ice with the slowness of a clock's hand. As a shadow passes over a patch of vapor, the mist turns from a glowing gold to a ghostly luminescent blue. The silence here is deeper than in the canyons. It is a vast, open-air silence that allows you to hear the smallest details. The faint click of a sensor adjusting its aperture, the soft whir of a drone's propellers as it glides through the thickening air, and the distant, low-frequency groan of the ice sheets shifting under their own weight. The first clouds. For the first time in millions of years, the Martian sky is no longer empty. The vapor rising from the poles is gathering. High in the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide and the newly released water molecules are finding each other. They are forming clouds. These are not the heavy gray rain clouds of Earth. They are noctilucent clouds, thin, wispy, and glowing. They catch the sunlight long after the ground has fallen into darkness, shimmering with an iridescent, pearlescent light. As you watch these clouds form, you realize the air is becoming a thing. It is no longer a vacuum, it is a medium. It can hold light, it can carry sound, it can harbor the dreams of a living world. The thin, swirling mists are the architects of this new atmosphere, building a blanket of warmth that will eventually allow the red dust to turn to green. The rhythms of the thermal cycle. The thaw follows the rhythm of the Martian day and night. During the day, the hissing and crackling are at their peak. The world is a flurry of movement, of rising gas and drifting plumes. But as the sun sets, the activity slows. The cold returns, and the vapor begins to settle back toward the surface as frost. This is the time of the tinkling ice once again. As the gas turns back into solids, it creates a delicate metallic ringing sound, as if the planet is being covered in a layer of silver bells. The terraforming towers switch to their night cycle, their red warning lights pulsing slowly, casting a soft glow over the resting ice. The machines do not stop, but they transition to a lower, more meditative frequency. They monitor the pressure. They calculate the volume of the release. They wait for the next dawn. The peace of the frozen frontier. Watching the thaw is an exercise in ultimate patience. It is a process that will take decades, then centuries. But in the presence of the mists, time seems to lose its meaning. The slow, swirling patterns of the vapor are a visual lullaby. You can imagine yourself floating above the ice cap, drifting with the mists. You are weightless, silent, and part of the transformation. The sounds of the ice, the hiss, the crackle, the soft thud of the geysers become a mantra. They tell you the change is happening. They tell you that the world is breathing again. The red planet is cold, but its heart is warming. The ice is moving, the sky is filling. As the mists wrap around the frozen ridges, they offer a sense of profound protection. The world is being cradled in a veil of its own making. There is nothing to fear in the cold, for the cold is where the life begins. The mists continue their dance. The ice continues its song. The poles are no longer the ends of the world. They are the beginning of the dream.
Chapter 4. Lichen and Low Light. The transformation has entered its most subtle and perhaps its most profound stage. On the scales of cosmic time, the arrival of the machines and the thawing of the poles were sudden, violent events. But the arrival of the green, the true biological green, is a process of infinite patience. It is a slow, creeping conquest of color over the monochrome world of iron and shadow. in the vast wind-scoured plains of the Valles Marineris, where the air is now just thick enough to carry a hint of moisture, the first inhabitants are taking hold. They are not trees, they are not even grass. They are the pioneers, the lichens. The appearance of the gray-green. Look closely at the crimson boulders that litter the canyon floor. These rocks, forged in ancient volcanic fires and polished by 1 billion years of dust storms, are no longer purely red. If you lean in, your eyes adjusting to the soft, diffused light of the Martian afternoon, you will see them. Tiny, irregular patches of gray-green and dusty blue. They look like splashes of dried paint or the oxidized patina on an old copper coin. These are the Terra lichen, a hybrid species designed to thrive where nothing else can. They have no roots, they do not need soil. They have only the rock, the thin sunlight, and the microscopic droplets of water that condense from the new atmosphere during the freezing nights. The spread is so slow that if you watched for a day or even a month, you would see no movement. But over the years, the patches expand. They follow the tiny fissures in the stone, crawling along the shadows where the moisture lingers longest. They are the first stroke of a brush on a canvas that spans a planet. The texture of survival. The sound of this chapter is the sound of absolute stillness. Unlike the rhythmic crunch of the Rovers or the hissing of the poles, the lichen grows in a silence so deep it feels like a physical weight. But there is a texture to this silence. If you could hear on a microscopic level, you would hear the faint, crystalline creak of the lichen's filaments as they expand against the mineral grains of the basalt. It is a slow, microscopic prying. The lichen is eating the rock, secreting mild acids that break down the stone, turning the hard, dead mineral into the building blocks of life. The surface of the lichen is not smooth. It is a complex landscape of ridges, craters, and tiny cup-like structures designed to catch the fleeting Martian rain, which is for now only a light, ghostly mist. When the mist touches the lichen, the gray-green color deepens. It turns to a rich emerald velvet for a few brief hours, absorbing every photon of the dim, distant sun before the cold returns to turn the moisture back to frost. The low light aesthetic. The light on Mars is different now. The thickening atmosphere, filled with the gases released from the poles, scatters the sunlight. The sky is no longer a harsh, dark violet. It has become a soft, pale salmon during the day, fading into a luminous electric blue at twilight. This low light is the lichen's kingdom. They do not like the harsh, direct glare of the sun. They thrive in the long shadows of the canyon walls and the cool, dim crevices of the boulder fields. In this soft illumination, the contrast between the deep, rusty red of the Martian soil and the cool, muted green of the lichen becomes a visual lullaby. The world is losing its sharp edges. The lichen softens the jagged contours of the rocks, rounding out the harsh geometry of the landscape. It is as if a fuzzy green blanket is being slowly pulled over the shoulders of the planet, tucking it in for a long, productive sleep.
The first clouds. For the first time in millions of years, The Martian sky is no longer empty. The vapor rising from the poles is gathering. High in the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide and the newly released water molecules are finding each other. They are forming clouds. These are not the heavy gray rain clouds of Earth. They are noctilucent clouds, thin, wispy, and glowing. They catch the sunlight long after the ground has fallen into darkness, shimmering with an iridescent, pearlescent light. As you watch these clouds form, you realize the air is becoming a thing. It is no longer a vacuum, it is a medium. It can hold light, it can carry sound, it can harbor the dreams of a living world. The thin, swirling mists are the architects of this new atmosphere, building a blanket of warmth that will eventually allow the red dust to turn to green. The rhythms of the thermal cycle. The thaw follows the rhythm of the Martian day and night. During the day, the hissing and crackling are at their peak. The world is a flurry of movement, of rising gas and drifting plumes. But as the sun sets, the activity slows. The cold returns, and the vapor begins to settle back toward the surface as frost. This is the time of the tinkling ice once again. As the gas turns back into solids, it creates a delicate metallic ringing sound, as if the planet is being covered in a layer of silver bells. The terraforming towers switch to their night cycle, their red warning lights pulsing slowly, casting a soft glow over the resting ice. The machines do not stop, but they transition to a lower, more meditative frequency. They monitor the pressure. They calculate the volume of the release. They wait for the next dawn. The peace of the frozen frontier. Watching the thaw is an exercise in ultimate patience. It is a process that will take decades, then centuries. But in the presence of the mists, time seems to lose its meaning. The slow, swirling patterns of the vapor are a visual lullaby. You can imagine yourself floating above the ice cap, drifting with the mists. You are weightless, silent, and part of the transformation. The sounds of the ice, the hiss, the crackle, the soft thud of the geysers become a mantra. They tell you the change is happening. They tell you that the world is breathing again. The red planet is cold, but its heart is warming. The ice is moving, the sky is filling. As the mists wrap around the frozen ridges, they offer a sense of profound protection. The world is being cradled in a veil of its own making. There is nothing to fear in the cold, for the cold is where the life begins. The mists continue their dance. The ice continues its song. The poles are no longer the ends of the world. They are the beginning of the dream.
Chapter 5. The Sound of Rain. For 1 billion years, the only liquid to touch the surface of Mars was the flow of ancient violent floods, or the fleeting trickles of salty brine beneath a dying sun. But today, the sky has changed. The atmosphere, once a thin veil of carbon dioxide, has grown heavy and humid. The work of the poles and the gas generators has reached a critical mass. The air is now thick enough to hold weight, the weight of water. This is the chapter of the first rain. It is not the torrential downpour of a tropical earthly storm. It is something much more delicate, more tentative.
It is the sound of a dream finally condensing into reality. The gathering of the gray. High above the Noctis Labyrinthus, the labyrinth of the night, the sky has lost its translucent blue. A heavy slate-gray curtain has been drawn across the sun. These are the first true rain clouds, vast rolling banks of cumulus, born from the moisture of the thawed poles and the oxygen released by the sprawling lichen fields. The light is dim and diffused, casting no shadows. The temperature hovers just above the freezing point. The world is waiting. The rovers have ceased their wandering. They have entered observation mode, with their sensors tilted upward, their internal processors recording every change in barometric pressure. The silence is absolute. Even the wind has died down, as if the planet itself is holding its breath, waiting for the first touch. The first droplet. It begins with a single lonely impact. On the flat silver deck of Aurelius 12, a tiny sphere of liquid water falls from the gray. It does not splash. It is too small for that. It lands with a soft, metallic pink. Pink. The sound is tiny, but in the vast silence of the Martian desert, it rings out like a bell. A second drop follows, hitting the basaltic soil nearby with a muffled thud. Then a third, striking the rover's camera lens and blurring the world into a beautiful, watery smear. Then the rhythm begins to build. Pink, tink, patter, tap. It is the sound of rain. On Earth, we take this for granted. We hide under umbrellas and run for cover. But here, the rain is a miracle. It is the first time the sky has reached down to touch the ground in an act of grace. The metallic drum. As the drizzle intensifies, the rovers become musical instruments. Each part of their anatomy produces a different note. The flat solar panels, now retracted to protect their delicate surfaces, act as drums, producing a low-pitched drum, 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 as the droplets accumulate. The thin, hollow structural struts ring with a higher melodic ting. The heavy main chassis gives off a solid, reassuring thump. Listen to the polyrhythm. It is not synchronized. It is a chaotic, beautiful arrangement of water hitting metal. Tink, tap, patter, pink, shh. The shh is the sound of the rain hitting the sand. The Martian dust, so dry for so long, is thirsty. As the water hits the fine grains of iron oxide, the dust does not initially absorb it. The water beads up, rolling across the surface like mercury, before finally soaking in and turning the bright red soil into a deep, rich crimson, the color of a bruised plum.
The scent of petrichor. As the rain falls, a new sensation fills the air. It is the smell of petrichor, that earthy, intoxicating scent that arises when rain falls on dry earth. On Mars, this scent is intensified. It is the smell of ancient minerals being woken up. It is the scent of the basalt, the hematite, and the volcanic ash finally being washed clean of their billion-year coat of dust. The lichen, covering the rocks below, reacts instantly. You can almost hear the collective sigh of the biological world. The gray-green crusts soak up the moisture, their cells plumping and expanding. The muted colors sharpen into vibrant emeralds and deep olives. The lichen begins to breathe more rapidly.
exhaling oxygen that mixes with the falling rain, creating a crisp, electrified atmosphere. The formation of the first pools. The rain continues for an hour, then 2. In the low gravity of Mars, the water does not run off quickly. It lingers. It gathers in the shallow depressions of the rocks and the wheel tracks of the rovers. These are the first pools. They are tiny, silver mirrors reflecting the heavy gray sky. If you were to stand by one of these pools, you would hear the soft bloop of a raindrop falling into the center, creating a series of slow-motion ripples that travel toward the edge. In the 38% gravity of Mars, the ripples move with a surreal, dreamlike slowness. They do not shimmer, they undulate. The rovers extend their sampling arms, not to dig this time, but to drink. They draw the water into their internal laboratories, analyzing its purity. The data they send back is a song of success. The water is clean. The water is life. The evening mist. As the storm passes and the clouds begin to break, the sun, now low on the horizon, pokes through the gaps in the gray. The light hits the wet world at a sharp angle, turning every wet rock into a glowing jewel and every rover into a shimmering statue of chrome and water. The moisture on the ground begins to evaporate, creating a low-lying golden mist that clings to the floor of the canyon. The sound of the rain is replaced by the sound of the drip. Drip, drop, drip. Water falls from the underside of the rovers, hitting the mud below with a satisfying wet splat. It falls from the edges of the lichen-covered boulders. It is the sound of a world that is now wet. The dryness, the lethal aridity of the old Mars has been broken. The peace of the damp world. There is a profound peace in the dampness. The dust, which used to be a constant abrasive presence, has been tamed. It is now earth. The air, which used to be a vacuum, is now a cool, refreshing shroud. As the rovers begin to move again, their wheels make a new sound, no longer the dry crunch-clack of Chapter 2, but a soft, squelching squish. It is the sound of mud. It is the sound of a foundation being laid for things with roots, things with stems, and things with leaves. The first reign of Mars is over, but its impact is eternal. The planet has been baptized. The red silence has been washed away by the silver melody of the water. As you listen to the final lingering drips of the storm, you feel a deep, heavy relaxation. The world is being cared for. The sky is providing. The machines are monitoring. You can rest now, knowing that the dust is settled, the green is drinking, and the long drought of the red planet is finally, truly over. Drip, drop, silence.
Chapter 6. The Valley of Moss. The era of the pioneers, the hardy, crusty lichens, has paved the way for a softer, deeper transformation. We have moved beyond the stage of mere survival and into the stage of luxury. In the deep, sheltered embrace of the Hebe's chasma, a unique phenomenon is occurring. The atmosphere is now dense enough to trap heat, and the water from the first rains has collected in the basin floors. Here, protected from the Martian winds by kilometer-high walls of red rock, the first true carpets of the new world are spreading. This is the Valley of Moss. It is a world where the sharp, jagged edges of the red planet are being swallowed by a soft, damp emerald tide. The sound of dampened echoes. The most striking change in this chapter is the sound, or rather, the lack of it. Mars has always been a place of echoes, where the sound of a falling rock or a mechanical click would bounce off the hard, frozen basalt and ring through the thin air. But moss is a natural acoustic sponge. As you descend into the valley, the world becomes quiet in a way you have never experienced. The heavy, plush carpets of Marinaris bryophyta, a genetically thickened moss, absorb every vibration. The rhythmic crunch of the Rovers is gone. Instead, the wheels sink slightly into the vibrant green cushion, producing only a faint, rhythmic huff, 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 as the air is squeezed out from the mossy layers. It is a weighted silence. It feels like walking into a room lined with heavy velvet curtains. The ambient noise of the planet, the distant wind, the hum of the orbital stations is filtered out, leaving only the intimate, close-up sounds of the valley floor. The emerald tide. The visual transformation is total. In the previous chapters, the green was a struggle, a patch here, a streak there. In the Valley of Moss, the green is the master. The moss does not just grow on the rocks, it flows over them. It pours into the crevices like slow-moving liquid. It climbs the lower reaches of the canyon walls, turning the ancient red cliffs into vertical hanging gardens. The color is not a single shade, but a complex tapestry. There are deep forest greens where the moss is thickest and holds the most water. There are bright neon chartreuses where the new growth is reaching for the afternoon sun. And in the shadows, there are velvety indigos and teals. The texture is inviting. The moss grows in thick, mounded hummocks, some as tall as a man's knee. They look like soft green clouds that have fallen from the sky and settled on the earth. If you were to press your hand into them, they would give way with a soft, springy resistance, releasing a tiny puff of oxygen-rich air and a drop of cool, clear water. The hidden waterways. Beneath the green carpet, a secret world is forming. The rain and the condensation from the canyon walls do not simply sit on the surface anymore. They filter down through the moss, creating a hidden network of slow-moving streams. You can hear the water now, but it is a muffled subterranean sound. It is the sound of a trickle buried under a pillow. Gurgle, drip, murmur. It is a low-frequency music that resonates through the ground. Every few hundred meters, the water emerges in a small moss-rimmed pool, a fairy well in the middle of the Martian desert. The rovers pause at these pools. Their sensors detect the movement of the water, and their internal logs record a landmark event: the first self-sustaining water cycle on the surface. The water is no longer just falling from the sky. It is being held, filtered, and moved by the biology of the planet. The breath of the valley. The air in the Hebus Chasma is different from the air on the plains above. It is thick, heavy, and sweet. The moss is an oxygen factory, working tirelessly through the long Martian day. As the sun warms the valley floor, the moss begins to transpire. Tiny beads of moisture form on the tips of the green filaments, catching the light like microscopic pearls. This moisture evaporates, creating a localized microfog that hangs just a few feet above the ground. The sound of this process is a soft, continuous shh. It is the sound of millions of tiny plants exhaling. It is a living breath. When you breathe in this air, it feels cool and heavy in your lungs, carrying the scent of damp earth, crushed herbs, and a hint of something sharp and clean, like the smell of a forest after a thunderstorm. The mechanical guardians. The rovers in this valley have changed their behavior. They are no longer explorers, they are gardeners. Their primary task is moss migration. They carry specialized containers of seed slurry, a mixture of moss spores and nutrient gel, and carefully apply it to areas where the carpet is thin. Watch the arm of a rover as it moves. The movements are even slower now, almost reverent. It brushes aside a loose stone to reveal the damp soil beneath, then gently deposits a dollop of the green slurry. The sound is a soft plop, followed by the mechanical whir of the rover's diagnostic camera checking the placement. The rovers also act as protectors. They monitor the acidity of the water and the temperature of the moss beds. If a particular patch is becoming too dry, a rover will deploy a localized misting system, a fine spray that sounds like a long, drawn-out psss. The mist catches the sunlight, creating tiny, fleeting rainbows that dance over the green mounds before settling into the moss. The blue twilight of the chasma. As the sun begins to drop below the high rim of the canyon, the Valley of Moss enters its most magical phase. Because the canyon is so deep, the floor falls into shadow long before the sky does. The green of the moss deepens into a luminescent, glowing emerald. The microfog begins to settle, thickening into a soft white blanket that obscures the rover's wheels. The sounds of the valley shift. The huff-huff of the wheels stops as the rovers find their nightly stations. The trickling of the hidden water seems to grow louder in the stillness. The temperature drops, but the thick moss acts as an insulator, keeping the ground and the life within it just above the freezing point. The moss holds on to the heat of the day, a green battery of thermal energy. The sound of contentment. To listen to the Valley of Moss is to listen to a world that has found its footing. The struggle of the First Spore is over. The mechanical harshness of the early days has been softened. There is a profound sense of contentment in the valley. The moss is not in a hurry. It does not need to grow tall like a tree. It only needs to spread, to thicken, and to hold the earth together. It is the foundation of everything that will come next. The ferns, the shrubs, and eventually the great Martian forests. As you drift through this green sanctuary, the rhythm of your own heart begins to slow. The softness of the moss, the muffled echoes, and the sweet, heavy air create a cocoon of relaxation. You are safe here, deep in the heart of the new Mars. The red planet is no longer a hostile frontier. It is a cradle. The moss continues to drink. The hidden water continues to murmur. The valley breathes in and breathes out. Hush, softness, green.
Chapter 7. The Century of Ferns. The great greening has reached a vertical milestone. For hundreds of years, the life on Mars was a horizontal affair. Lichens clinging to rock, mosses carpeting the basins. But the atmosphere has reached a tipping point. The barometric pressure is now high enough to support the structural weight of stems and the complex vascular systems of larger flora. We have entered the century of ferns, an era defined by the slow, geometric uncurling of ancient green designs against the backdrop of the Martian sky. The architecture of the fiddlehead.
In the sheltered lowlands of Aeolus Palus, the landscape is no longer a flat expanse. Rising from the deep, damp moss beds are thousands of tight spiral structures. These are the fiddleheads of the Olympus fern, a hybrid species engineered with reinforced cellulose to stand tall in the 38% gravity of the red planet. The sound of this era is the sound of tension and release. If you listen closely in the pre-dawn stillness, you can hear the faint crystalline creak of a fern as it begins its daily growth. It is a slow, rhythmic sound, the sound of biological gears turning. As the sun warms the fronds, the internal pressure of the plant's sap increases. Pop, snap. A tiny fiber of the outer sheath gives way, allowing the spiral to uncurl just a fraction of a millimeter more. It is a mechanical-sounding biology. The uncurling is not a smooth motion, but a series of microscopic staccato movements. It is the music of a world gaining height. The unfurling canopy. As the day progresses and the Martian sun, larger and brighter now through the humid haze, reaches its zenith, the ferns fully deploy. The sound of the valley shifts from the muffled silence of the moss to the whispering of the fronds. The Olympus ferns do not have leaves in the traditional earthly sense. They have feathered, lace-like pinnules designed to maximize surface area for the still precious sunlight. When a light breeze moves through the canyon, these millions of tiny feathers rub against one another. Shh, shh, shh. It is a dry, papery sound, like the rustling of ancient silk. Because the air is still thinner than Earth's, the sound is higher in pitch, a delicate treble that floats over the deep bass hum of the terraforming machines. It is the sound of a world that is still learning how to be a forest. The low-gravity sway. One of the most hypnotic sights of the century of ferns is the way the plants move. In the low Martian gravity, a fern that stands 3 meters tall has the weight of a small shrub on Earth. When the wind catches them, they do not jerk or whip. They sway in long, languid arcs. The movement is underwater in its grace. A gust of wind ripples through the fern grove like a wave through a kelp forest. You can watch the green wave travel from one end of the valley to the other, a slow, rhythmic undulation that pulls the eye and calms the mind. The sound of this movement is a low-frequency thrum. The stems, though reinforced, are flexible. As they bend, they create a soft, rhythmic whir in the air. It is a soothing, repetitive cadence that marks the passage of the Martian afternoon. The rain in the fronds. The rains have become more frequent now, and their interaction with the ferns create a new acoustic landscape. When the raindrops hit the broad, feathered fronds, the sound is no longer the metallic tink of the Rovers. It is a soft, percussive patter. Tap, tap, patter, tap. Each fern acts like a small green drum. Because the fronds are arranged in layers, the rain creates a cascading sound, a waterfall of taps, as the moisture drips from the tip of one leaf to the center of the one below. Plip, plap, plip. The ferns are designed to funnel this water toward their central stems, where it trickles down into the mossy roots. The sound of a rainstorm in the fern groves is a complex, multi-layered symphony of wetness. It is the sound of a world that has finally learned how to manage its resources, turning the gift of the sky into the growth of the ground.
The shadows of the giants. For the first time in the history of the planet, there is true shade. The ferns, standing in dense groves, create a canopy that blocks the direct rays of the sun. Below the fronds, the temperature is constant and cool. The light is filtered through the green lace, creating a cathedral light. Dappled patterns of emerald and gold that dance on the mossy floor. The Rovers, now smaller in comparison to the flora, navigate these shaded aisles with a quiet reverence. The sound in the shade is heavy. The moisture trapped beneath the canopy creates a thick, humid atmosphere that dampens sound even further than the moss did. Inside a fern grove, the rest of the world disappears. There is only the sound of your own mechanical breath, the hum of the Rovers' cooling fans, and the slow, rhythmic drip-drop of the condensation. The scent of the high forest. The scent of the century of ferns is more complex than the mosses. It is no longer just earthy and metallic. It has become green. There is a sweetness in the air now, the smell of sap, of crushed stalks, and of the spores that the ferns release into the breeze. It is a dusty, botanical scent, reminiscent of a greenhouse on Earth, but with a sharp, ozone-like edge unique to Mars. It is the smell of a world that is working hard, pumping liters of oxygen and water vapor into the atmosphere every hour. As you linger in the grove, the scent fills your senses, acting as a chemical signal to the brain that the environment is safe, lush, and full of life. It is the scent of a successful homecoming. The night of the spores. As the sun sets, the ferns perform their final ritual of the day. In the cooling air, the spore cases on the undersides of the fronds contract. Click, click, pop. Thousands of tiny capsules burst open, releasing clouds of microscopic spores into the night wind. In the light of the Martian moons, these spore clouds look like silver dust swirling and dancing between the tall green stems. The sound is a faint, rhythmic sizzle, like 1,000 tiny sparklers being lit at once. It is the sound of the future being sown. Each spore is a blueprint for another fern, another oxygen factory, another step toward the great forest. The peace of the ascent. The century of ferns is an era of quiet ambition. The plants are reaching upward, claiming the sky that the machines have built for them. There is a sense of structural integrity and growing complexity that wasn't there before. To listen to the ferns is to listen to the planet growing stronger. The rhythms are longer, the sounds are deeper, and the silence is more profound. The world is no longer a flat red desert, it is a three-dimensional garden of swaying green lace. As the Rovers settle into the shadows of the ferns for the night, their blue lights pulsing softly against the emerald stalks, the peace of the grove settles over you. The world is taller now. The air is thicker. The dream is uncurling, one leaf at a time. Sway, whispering, growth.
Chapter 8. Solar Noon in the Highlands. The transition of Mars is not merely a change of color, but a change of temperature and energy. In the vast elevated plateaus of the Tharsis Bulge, the air has achieved a clarity and thickness that creates a new kind of day.
It is no longer the dim, dusty noon of the old world. It is the era of the solar Highlands, a place where the sun is felt as a physical weight, a warm hand pressing down upon a world of glass, metal, and shimmering chlorophyll. The peak of the day. It is 12:40 p.m. on the Solus Planum. The sun, though smaller than it appears on Earth, shines with a brilliant white-gold intensity through the terraformed atmosphere. The sky is a deep, resonant cerulean, devoid of the red dust that once choked the light. At this altitude, the air is crisp, but the sun's rays carry a newfound potency. The sound of the Highlands at noon is the sound of vibrancy. Listen to the solar arrays of the sun drinkers, massive stationary energy farms that dot the ridges. As the heat reaches its peak, you can hear the internal cooling fluids of the panels circulating. It is a soft, rhythmic whir pulse. The metal support structures expand in the heat, giving off occasional, satisfying tinks and creaks. It is the sound of a world charging its batteries. It is the sound of pure, clean power being pulled from the heavens and funneled into the roots of the planet. The shimmering heat. As you look across the plateau, the landscape appears to vibrate. The heat rising from the dark, lichen-covered basalt creates heat haze, shimmering curtains of air that distort the horizon. This thermal movement has its own sound. If you were to stand in the center of the plateau, you would hear a low, ghostly hum. It is the sound of the atmosphere in motion, a convection chorus as the warm air rises and the cooler air from the shadowed canyons rushes in to fill the void. It is a steady, oceanic drone that provides a background for the more delicate sounds of the Highlands. The rovers in this region have shifted their posture. They have deployed their auxiliary cooling fins, looking like silver birds with their wings outstretched. Their solar wings are tilted at precise angles to catch the direct flow of photons. The sound of their internal fans is a constant, high-pitched singing, a digital mantra that tells the story of thermal regulation and survival. The glossy green. The flora of the Highlands is different from the mosses of the canyons. Here, the plants must deal with intense radiation and high light. The Highland laurel, a genetically synthesized shrub, has evolved thick, waxy leaves that act like biological solar panels. The leaves are a deep, glossy emerald, so shiny they reflect the sun like mirrors. When the wind moves through a laurel grove at noon, the sound is a bright, rhythmic clatter. Clack, clack, shh. Unlike the papery whisper of the ferns, these leaves are heavy. They strike each other like smooth river stones being rubbed together. It is a bright sound, full of energy and life. The leaves are not just catching light, they are protecting the precious water within their veins, their waxy coatings snapping back into place as they sway.
The Solar Symphony. At solar noon, every element of the landscape is a participant in an energy exchange. The rocks. The dark basalt absorbs the heat, humming with stored energy. The leaves. The chlorophyll molecules are working at maximum capacity, a microscopic chemical factory that produces a faint, sweet scent of ozone and sugar. The rovers. The machines are silent, their motors stilled as they focus entirely on drinking the light. If you close your eyes, you can feel the rhythm of this exchange. It is a slow, steady throb of productivity. There is no frantic movement here. The Highlands at noon are a place of profound stillness, but it is a busy stillness. It is the silence of a battery being filled to the brim. The scent of warmth. On the air in the Highlands at noon has a specific, intoxicating aroma. It is the smell of hot green. On Earth, you might recognize this as the smell of a sun-drenched meadow in mid-July. On Mars, it is a mixture of the sharp, spicy scent of the laurel resins and the clean, metallic smell of sun-warmed titanium. It is a dry, invigorating scent that speaks of health, growth, and the successful taming of the sun. As the rovers breathe in this air through their intake filters, their chemical sensors register the highest oxygen levels on the planet. This is the peak of the day's production, the moment when the planet is exhaling the most life-sustaining gas into the sky. The Blue Shadow Retreat. In the Highlands, shadows are precious commodity. Under the vertical sun, the shadows of the rovers and the laurel shrubs shrink into small, dark blue pools directly beneath them. These shadows are the only cool spots in a world of heat. Small experimental insects, the first Martian bees, hover in these shadows, their wings making a faint rhythmic buzz that sounds like a tiny electric motor. They stay in the shade for a few seconds before darting out into the light to visit a flowering shrub, their movement a golden blur in the white light. The contrast between the brilliant sun-washed plateau and the cool indigo shadows is a visual rest for the eyes. It creates a sense of depth and stability. The world is no longer a flat red plain. It is a landscape of high contrast beauty. The peace of the peak. There is a unique sense of security in the Highland noon. The sun is the ultimate provider, and at this hour its provision is absolute. There is no doubt about the future of the planet when you are standing in the middle of a grove of shimmering green, surrounded by machines that are glowing with captured light. The rhythm of the noon is the rhythm of arrival. The terraformers have reached the heights. They have claimed the sun. As you listen to the rhythmic whir of the cooling fans and the gentle clatter of the waxy leaves, you feel the warmth of the sun on your own mind. The heavy golden light acts as a blanket, pressing away the cold of space and the memories of the old dead Mars. The world is full, the world is bright, the world is warm. Shimmer, clatter, warmth.
Chapter 9. The First True Forest. The transition from shrubs and ferns to the great timberlands of the Valles Marineris is the crowning achievement of the first millennium. We have arrived at the era of the iron pines, towering, genetically sculpted giants that have transformed the Martian horizon from a jagged line of rock into a soft, undulating sea of deep indigo and forest green. This is the first true forest. It is a place of vertical majesty, where the scale of life finally matches the scale of the canyons. The voice of the pines. The most profound change in the forest is the sound of the wind. In the early centuries, the wind was a thin, whistling ghost that carried only dust. Now, the atmosphere has the body of an earthly breeze. As it moves through the needles of 1,000,000 pines, it creates a sound that the ancients called citharism. It is a deep, rhythmic sh-woom. Unlike the papery rustle of the ferns, the iron pines have a bass note. Their needles are thick, coated in a protective silica wax that makes them heavy and resonant. When the wind surges, the forest doesn't just rustle, it moans with a low-frequency vibration that you can feel in the soles of your feet. It is a steady oceanic breathing, the sound of a planet that finally has a voice. Between the surges of wind, there is the sound of the wood. In the low gravity, these trees grow to heights that would be impossible on Earth, some reaching 60 or 70 meters. Their trunks, reinforced with carbon nanotube fibers integrated into the bark, sway in long, slow arcs. As they lean, the wood fibers rub against one another, creating a rhythmic creak, groan, creak. It sounds like the hull of a great wooden sailing ship navigating a calm sea. It is the sound of structural strength and flexibility, the sound of life holding its own against the sky. The indigo canopy. Looking up from the forest floor, the sky is almost entirely obscured. The canopy of the iron pines is dense and dark. The needles are not the bright green of earthly pines. They are a deep, dark indigo, optimized to absorb the specific spectrum of light that filters through the Martian atmosphere. The light that does reach the floor is filtered light. It falls in long vertical shafts, illuminating the rising mists and the floating spores. In these shafts of light, you can see the breadth of the forest. The trees are transpiring on a massive scale, pumping tons of water vapor into the air. The sound of this moisture is a constant, soft drip-drop from the high needles to the forest floor. It is a vertical rain that happens even when the sky is clear. Plip, plap, patter. The water hits the thick layer of fallen needles, the duff, which has created a soft, springy carpet over the once red rocks. Walking through this forest, the sound of your movement is a muffled thump, huff, as if the ground itself is a giant mattress. The scent of the deep green. The aroma of the first forest is overwhelming. It is no longer the faint scent of lichen or the sweetness of ferns. It is a heavy, resinous, and complex perfume. It is the smell of pinene mixed with the sharp, cold scent of the Martian Highlands. There is a thickness to the air here. It smells of damp earth, decaying needles, and the spicy, peppery resin that the iron pines bleed to seal their bark against the cold. It is a scent that slows the heart rate and clears the mind. To breathe in the forest is to inhale the very essence of the terraforming project, a concentrated dose of the oxygen and humidity that thousands of years of labor have produced. The mechanical hermits. The Rovers have changed again. In the forest, they look like small, busy beetles navigating the roots of giants. The forest keepers are specialized units with long, multi-jointed limbs designed to climbing and pruning. Listen to the sound of a keeper at work. You hear the rhythmic whir-clack of its climbing spikes as it ascends a massive trunk. Then the high-frequency zip of a sonic pruner removing a dead limb. The limb falls, moving in slow motion through the low gravity, hitting the forest floor with a soft, distant whump.
These machines move with a quiet, autonomous grace. They communicate with the trees through sensors embedded in the bark, monitoring the flow of sap and the health of the roots. The sound of their data transmission is a series of soft, melodic pings that blend into the whispering of the wind. They are the silent partners of the pines, ensuring that the first forest grows strong and straight. The twilight of the giants. As the sun sets over the rim of the canyon, the forest enters a state of deep blue shadow. The indigo needles turn almost black, and the trunks look like silver pillars in the fading light. The wind usually dies down at twilight, leaving the forest in a state of ringing silence. Without the sizzle of the needles, the smaller sounds become audible. You can hear the bark of the trees contracting in the cooling air, a series of sharp pops like distant firecrackers. You can hear the gurgle of the irrigation streams that the Rovers have dug between the roots. Then the night chorus begins, not from animals, not yet, but from the wind harps. These are small aeolian instruments installed by the terraformers in the high branches. As the cooling night air sinks into the canyon, it passes through these harps, creating long, haunting chords that drift through the trees. It is a mournful, beautiful music that marks the end of the day and the beginning of the long, cold Martian night. The peace of the pillars. Standing in the heart of the first forest, you feel a sense of absolute permanence. The lichens were a crust, the mosses were a carpet, but the trees are a fortress. They have locked the soil in place. They have claimed the air. They have turned the red planet into a sanctuary of green. The rhythm of the forest is the rhythm of eternity. The trees do not count days, they count centuries. Their slow, majestic swaying is a reminder that the greatest changes are the ones that take the longest. As you drift off to the sound of the wind in the needles and the slow, rhythmic creaking of the trunks, you are cocooned in the strongest protection the planet has to offer. The forest is breathing for you. The forest is standing watch. The forest is home. Hum, creek, indigo. Chapter 10. The Emerald Horizon. 1,000 years have passed since the first silver heart of a rover began to beat upon the dust. Time, once the enemy of the red planet, has become its greatest architect. As we ascend to the highest peak of the Olympus Mons, standing at the very edge of the atmosphere, we look out across a world that has forgotten its old name. Mars is no longer the red planet. It is the emerald jewel of the solar system. The horizon is no longer a jagged, rusty line against a black void. It is a soft, glowing curve of vibrant greens, deep indigos, and shimmering silvers. This is the emerald horizon, the final, breathtaking proof that life is the most powerful force in the universe. The view from the summit. From this height, the scale of the transformation is almost impossible to comprehend. Below us, the vast plains of the Amazonas Planitia, once a wasteland of basalt and wind-scoured stone, are now a rolling sea of forest. The canopy is so dense that it looks like a solid, undulating carpet of green velvet. The sound at this altitude is the sound of totality. It is a low, constant roar, the collective voice of a planet's worth of wind moving through a planet's worth of leaves.
It sounds like a distant ocean, a vast and steady whoosh that never ceases. It is the sound of an entire world breathing in unison. In the old days, the wind was thin and sharp. Now it is heavy, rich, and musical. It carries the weight of billions of tons of oxygen and water vapor. The silver veins. Cutting through the green are the silver veins of the New World, the rivers. The water that once was locked in the poles and buried in the permafrost now flows freely across the surface. From the summit, you can see the great Marineris River, a massive ribbon of sapphire and silver that snakes through the floor of the canyon system. The sound of the water has changed. It is no longer the muffled trickle of the mossy valleys. It is a powerful, rhythmic surge. You can hear the distant thunder of waterfalls as the rivers spill over ancient volcanic ridges, creating clouds of mist that rise like white ghosts into the blue sky. Rumble, crash, shh. The water is the blood of the planet, and its sound is the sound of a strong, healthy pulse. It moves with a purpose, feeding the forests, filling the new lakes, and stabilizing the climate. It is the ultimate recycler, the medium through which the planet shares its life from one pole to the other. The sky of cerulean and gold. The thin violet vacuum of the past is gone. In its place is a thick, protective dome of brilliant cerulean blue. Because the gravity is lower than Earth's, the atmosphere extends much further into space, creating a soft sky that glows with an ethereal inner light. At the horizon, where the green of the land meets the blue of the air, there is a band of golden light, the emerald glow. This is caused by the high concentration of oxygen and the scattering of light through the forest mists. It makes the world look as if it is perpetually in a state of sunrise. The sound of the sky is the sound of the high winds. Far above the forests, the jet streams move with a rhythmic whistling cadence. Wee, oo, wee. They are the global transport system for the clouds, moving the moisture from the seas to the highlands. They sound like a flute played by a giant, a constant melodic reminder of the planet's newfound atmospheric complexity. The silence of the machines. The Rovers, the Terraformers, and the Builders are still here, but they have faded into the background. They are no longer the protagonists of the story. They are the caretakers. In the deep forests and the lush valleys, the machines move with a silent, almost invisible grace. Their metallic hulls are now etched with lichen and covered in a fine layer of green pollen. The sound of the machines is now a whisper. They have reached a state of perfect harmony with the environment. Their power is drawn entirely from the sun and the wind. Their movements are synchronized with the growth of the trees. The sharp clicks and whirs of the early years have been replaced by a soft magnetic hum that is almost indistinguishable from the buzzing of the new Martian insects. They are like the stone guardians of an ancient temple, present, watchful, but peaceful. They have fulfilled their purpose. They have given the world back to itself. The scent of a living world. If you could stand on the emerald horizon and breathe in, you would experience the most complex aroma in the galaxy. It is no longer just the smell of pine or the scent of damp earth. It is the global scent. It is a mixture of everything we have explored in this chronicle. The spicy resin of the iron pines, the sweet floral notes of the highland shrubs, the earthy mushroom-like scent of the deep mosses, the sharp, clean smell of ozone from the mountain storms, the salty, metallic tang of the new oceans.
It is a scent that feels like a physical embrace. It is the smell of a home. It is the scent of 1 billion lives working together to maintain a delicate, beautiful balance. The twilight of the red. As the sun, now a warm golden orb, begins to sink toward the horizon, the world undergoes its final daily transformation. The red planet makes one last appearance. For a few minutes, as the light hits the atmosphere at its shallowest angle, the shadows of the canyons turn a deep royal purple. The tips of the iron pines glow with a fiery crimson light. For a moment, it looks like the old Mars, the planet of fire and dust. But then the light shifts. The green of the forests absorbs the red, turning it into a deep, rich bronze. The rivers reflect the violet sky. The white mists in the valleys begin to glow with a soft phosphorescent light, triggered by the bioluminescent mosses that have been engineered to light the forest floors. The sound of the night is a symphony of peace. The wind harps in the trees begin their evening song. The rivers continue their rhythmic surge. The distant roar of the wind becomes a gentle, soothing lullaby. There is no fear in the dark on the new Mars. The cold is a managed cold. The dark is a resting dark. Watching the emerald horizon, you realize that the story of Mars is no longer about technology or engineering. It is about the persistence of life. The machines provided the spark, but the planet provided the fire. The terraformers are no longer just the rovers. The terraformers are the trees, the mosses, the rivers, and the wind. The planet is now a self-driving masterpiece of biological art. The red silence has been replaced by the green song. The iron desert has been replaced by the emerald sanctuary. As you look out over the horizon, you feel a sense of profound cosmic completion. The 1,000-year dream is over because the reality has finally here. You can close your eyes now. The world is green, the air is thick, the water is flowing, the machines are watching, the red planet is gone, and in its place a new world has awakened. The horizon, the green, the home.